Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about strategies in implementing Microsoft Teams and channels. This is super important before you get started in creating your teams and channels. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Okay, so Bobby, let's talk about these strategies that you wanted to discuss before you create a Microsoft team.
So what we want to do is really kind of dive into this and start talking about the strategies. And what I would highly suggest before you get started in even creating any of these is start with paper and pencil. So what I did is I created this chart, and then me and Kaylee are going to kind of walk through this fictitious teams, channels, and just try to see how we might potentially navigate this and kind of get in our head about how we'd approach it. And then that would provide you some important insight on how you might want to do it yourself.
Yeah, that sounds great. I know for us, we've created and torn down many of those towers. Yeah. So I think it will be good to tell you what to do and what not to do.
We're going to go through this. Kaylee's, of course, going to have the different markers and some different topics we're going to talk about. But specifically, first is going to be the strategy. Second, we're going to be covering the actual processes, some of the things that we're going to discuss. So the first thing that I want to talk about strategy-wise that I think it's important before you get started is map it out. Get a piece of paper and pencil and draw it out. But before you do that, you really want to understand what the differences are. So Kaylee, can you maybe explain a little bit more about the differences between, what kind of team that you can create and what its purpose is?
Yeah, so you can create different types of teams. There are 3 different types of teams inside of Microsoft Teams. There are the public and the private teams, but there are also organizational wide teams that you can only see when you're a global admin. So the average person watching this video will most likely see 2 options, the public and private team.
And for those of you who are tuning in, what he means when he says organizational wide, only being able to view it, when you create an organizationally wide team, everyone immediately joins it. So if you have a team that you want to make, that's the right way to do it. But the only people that can create that team is an organizationally wide admin.
Yeah.
For obvious reasons, you don't want your normal users to start willy-nilly adding teams to everybody's channels. It could get really crazy.
Yeah. Yep. And the public is just like what it says. It is public to your entire organization. So your organization members have the opportunity to join it anytime they'd like. Whereas the private is only invitation, only by invitation can they be added.
Right. And if you look at the screen that I'm sharing, the way that you could create this is you could create perhaps 4 different types of teams. Okay. And you could create a marketing team that could potentially be public. Or you might want it to be private because perhaps you don't want the sales team and anyone else to be able to see the marketing material.
Right.
So that's where the first decision you want to kind of make is how do you want to create those teams and what kind of things can they do and they not do?
So you've got the main teams that you can create, but then you've also got these nested channels underneath each individual team that sort of sets as an opportunity for you to break down that team even further into different categories. Now, what Bobby has here is he has a certain way that he created the channels to where they have to do with the main team above it. For example, the marketing team has a general events and drip campaign channel underneath that team. Now, there are different ways that you can utilize the channel, but these channels are very important because there are different types of channels that give different types of access to your users underneath that team.
So as you can see under this marketing, general would be an example of a standard channel. So it automatically makes it, and any files and conversations you see, everybody will be able to be a part of and see that has been invited to this team. But perhaps maybe you want only a subset of the marketing team to have access to the drip campaign. Maybe there's 3 or 4 people and you might have a 20-person marketing team. If that's the case, you could make this channel, think of them as almost like CB radios. You could break this channel out as private. For those that you may or may not be aware of, SharePoint is what's powering this in the background. So Microsoft creates one library And all these files that are going to be saved under general and events will kind of have their own folder, and that's where they will reside. Now, it'll be transparent to your users, and we'll show you that in a minute, how that works. But they can look at those files. But if you create a private channel, it will not utilize the same SharePoint library. It will create a brand new one and then restrict the content for access. So people get kind of worried. They're like, oh my gosh, if I have access to this marketing team, can everybody in this team see the content in here? And the answer is no.
No.
And the reason why they're able to work that magic is they create a separate library and assign those permissions. And this is really a great way to spin up specific SharePoint libraries utilizing kind of your criteria you want, because if Teams just makes it so much easier.
It makes it way easier than SharePoint. And if you want to see how much easier it is, I do have a video that I'll link above going more in detail and in depth on how you can connect them and make it way easier for you and your team.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's another one that is called a shared channel. We're not going to cover this in here, but the shared channels are more intended for utilization outside your organization. Maybe we might do a specific video on that.
Right.
But there's some federation processes that you can kind of create so that people that aren't inside your organization, but you or companies that are outside your organization that you work tightly with, that you want them to have access to that data, you can create what's called a shared channel and then give them access to that. And then they can collaboratively work with you on that content and do it in a safe and secure manner. It's very interesting. It's a lot more advanced. It's not something I would suggest someone just tackle willy-nilly unless they've got a lot more experience doing it. Plus, you're going to have your admins buy-in and assistance to create that, especially since there's going to be federation involved.
Right.
Okay, so now specifically, I think what we want to do here is let's start talking about the strategy aspect of how we might want to line this up now that we've covered these respective things about the differences between teams and the different types of channels that are available for you when you're creating them. How's that sound?
Yep, that sounds great.
Okay, in this scenario, Kaylee, how would you attack this? Would you set it up? Because the way that I've set this up is I created a marketing team, and then I created these respective channels under them, and then a sales, accounting, and HR. But is this the only way we could do it, Kaylee, or could we do it a different way?
No, so we actually have done it a different way than this as well, where you can actually, instead of separating your different departments under different teams, you can actually set up a main team for your organization and then put the departments as channels underneath that team.
Yeah. And with the security and capabilities you have under there, you can do it more confidently.
Right.
Now, I don't know if you have super sensitive files like HR, I would do it that way. I would still probably spin those out separately just because you just don't want people to see it. Now, one of the things that's important to understand about private channels that you create underneath a team is they are invisible to those people that are members of it, except the owners.
Right.
So, for example, under the marketing, for example, let's say that Kaylee is the owner of the marketing team and I am a member. Kaylee could spin up the marketing, this drip campaign channel. I'm a member and can see events in general because those are both standard channels. But I would not see the drip campaign because she did not invite me to that private channel. So I wouldn't know of its existence. Now, because she is the owner, she could do that. Now, maybe let's say that Sally is also the owner of this channel, but she has not been invited to it. She would see the existence of this drip campaign channel because it's private, but because even though she's the owner, she knows it exists, but she would not be able to see the content or be able to join it. So just because you're owner doesn't mean you can see what's in it. You can see it's there, but you can't get access to the data because you are not given permissions to it. So it is a pretty tightly integrated permission system, which actually works pretty well. Again, this is very configurable. So there's lots of different ways. It's really about just trying to understand the different types of rights and permissions that you want to set in here and how you want to have access. Again, a lot of the reasons why we use these channels underneath here is because we want to segment our file structure and how we collaborate and share information. A good example of that is the drip campaign. Maybe you have specific files that you want to have isolated to this and you want to organize it that way. So all the communication and files would be nested here. And then maybe you have some specific events you do throughout the year and you want to have those files and pictures and things for people to be able to upload and have them stored here. So
Right.
as you start to create these different channels, you can start segmenting the data and make it much easier to find it.
Yep.
Similar to folders inside of just a regular Windows Share, for example, but you're doing it with a lot more power since you can do collaborating, communicating, and chatting, and video and recording, and a whole lot more. And we haven't even talked about editions, which Kaylee's created a whole bunch of content about that as well.
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. All right, Kaylee. So why don't you take control and let's see how it goes.
Okay, let's get into it. All right, so inside here, I've got my YouTube training team. Now, how you would create a team is you would go down to this join or create a team. Some people may have it up here as a plus button, but I have it down here because I've got, I think, the new version. So here, if you create a team by clicking on this button, you've got some options. You've got from scratch, or you've got from a group or team. Something that's really cool if you choose to do from a group or team is when you click on this, you can actually use an existing Microsoft team as a template for you to base your new team off of. So if you wanted to add members to this team that are the same as a team that you've already previously created, you don't have to continue to add those members over and over again. It also saves a lot of different things, such as your channel structure, as well as your structure of hierarchy inside of those teams. So if you have certain owners and certain members, it will mimic them. And it will allow you to click these things. So if I wanted to mimic it off of this, underneath here, you've got the options of if you want to copy the tabs, the team settings, the apps, the members, and you can select what you do and do not want to add and then click create, which is pretty cool to be able to do.
This is huge because back in the day when it was first started, you didn't have these kinds of options. And man, it was a pain if you were trying to like create a brand new one from scratch, because you're like, it's so similar, but there's some things that are different. And I don't want to have to redo this over again. And like Kaylee's saying is you have team settings and different tabs. So in those tab settings, you could link to a SharePoint library. It could link to external files like Dropbox. It could link to a planner. It could link to Visio. There's all kinds of things and powers that you have under those tabs. And Kaylee's got some videos about that as well. Which are very, very powerful.
Absolutely. And I can link that above. So something to note, though, if you do choose to copy over tabs from a previous team, when you do it, and I'll share my screen right here. When you do it, it does not, if you have a website connected to it, it does not connect the website. It actually makes you set up the tab again. So if you have different tabs here that you've added websites to, just note that, that you are going to have to set those back up, but it does remember the title of the tab in that the tab is there.
Right. Now, also files, like if you have files or contents that you've stored under there or structures you've had, that's not going to get moved over either.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So that's a cool way to create a team. So you've got that way, but then you've also just got the you do have the Microsoft 365 groups, which we can create a separate video just about that because that connects into a couple different things that we can talk about later. But you've also got the from scratch option. Now, when you do that, it has the options like Bobby talked about previously of creating it private or public. Public is anybody in the organization can join. Private needs permission to join. So when I create a channel, I'm going to create a private one since I've already created this public one here called YouTube Training. When you create that, you'll give it a title. I'm just going to keep consistent, Dad, with what you said.
Okay.
Then you can add a description. I'm just going to leave it blank for now. Nice work. And then it's going to ask you who you'd like to add as a member. So I am going to add Jackie and add here. Then you can choose to add her as a member or an owner. I'm going to keep her as a member and close.
Let's just reiterate again the differences between owners and members. So owners do have a few additional powers that they can do. They don't have to be an organizational administrator to be an owner.
Global admin.
Right. Or a global admin for that matter. But if you're the owner, you start to have a special tab under settings that you can control, like what people can do inside that team, like
Right.
deleting or adding types of comments. There's all kinds of interesting little possibilities. So you do want to pay attention to who you make the owner of the team.
Mhm.
And then also, again, like I mentioned before, the owner can see any private channels of their existence, but if they haven't been invited, they still won't have access.
Right.
But it is a powerful thing to control, and they can remove and add users as well.
Mhm.
That is another thing that the owners of the channels can do.
Mhm.
And so those are important things to take into consideration when you're making a team.
Mhm. Yeah, good point. And I also have a video about that as well that I can link to that goes more in detail on the internal structures of a Microsoft team. Okay, so now that you've created this team, you can then add channels underneath. Just like Bobby said, there is a general channel that was already created.
Click on files. So if you go under files there, you'll see that's kind of where you can access the files that were created for that team. Since we created it brand new, it's empty.
Mhm.
And what Microsoft did behind the scenes is because she created that marketing team, it now spun up a brand new SharePoint site.
Mhm.
It's all transparent. It tied it all together, and presto changeo, it's done. So
Right.
as you're dropping files there, that's where they're going.
Correct. Mhm. And when I added Jackie to this team, she also was added to that SharePoint site. So it goes hand in hand with the access of that SharePoint site. So then when you're wanting to create a channel, you would click on the three dots next to the team, and then you would choose Add Channel. When you do that, you've got the option to title it. So we're going to title it that Drip Campaign. You've got the optional description here, and then you've got the privacy settings. So you can create it as a standard, a private, or a shared channel. Now, the general channel is already a standard channel, and that's what that looks like. So I'm going to create a private channel so you guys can see what that looks like. Now I can add members to this. I'm going to not, for the sake of this video, and skip it, but I have the opportunity to add Jackie to this channel. Now notice if I went to type Bobby's name, it would not pop up. And that is because he is not a part of the marketing team.
I'm not a cool kid.
Not a cool kid.
Added.
Sorry,
Yeah.
you didn't get invited to the Cool Kids Club.
That's a very important, and it's really worth re-mentioning again, Kaylee. Re-mentioning the significance about that.
Yeah. So when you create a team, you need to add everybody to that team that you would like in the channels below it. You cannot just randomly add people outside of the team into that channel. It won't allow you to, if it's because it's private. And so you're basically trying to bypass the structure of command inside of that team. So you would first have to add Bobby in to the team itself for him to then be added inside this channel.
Right. To be eligible.
To be even eligible. Yes, correct. So I'm not going to be able to add him, and I'm just going to skip. And then you see this beautiful lock next to Drip Campaign right here. This lets you know just by quick glance that that is a private versus a standard channel. So again, this channel has its own SharePoint site now and its own library that is not connected to the general channel at all. It's completely private, and only the people who have access to that specific channel will have access to it.
Okay, so let's go ahead and hit Create Team here, Kaylee. So in here, let's do from scratch. Now, remember we said that organizational wide is an option that could be here, but it's missing because neither of us are global admins inside our container. Nobody should be using global admin accounts as a normal walk around account. Very bad idea. It's like attaching a tactical nuke to your back and just walking around the neighborhood. Nobody would do that. It's not a good idea.
Yeah.
Those counts should be separate and called upon when you need to do specific tasks like creating an organizational wide team. The beautiful thing about what's helpful about org wide teams is it adds everyone automatically for the end of time. So if you have new people that get hired, they get added to that organizational wide team as an option automatically. So it will show up in their team for them as soon as they hop on. So those are great things to think about if you have things that you want everybody to be a part of and be able to work collaboratively. So while that's not listed here, it is definitely an option and something you want to consider when you're doing your planning. So the other thing that I want to talk about is templates. We're not going to go into any detail about this, but when you go to create a new one, you'll see there's this list underneath of all these possible templates. Now, your system admin can control how many of those templates or if any of those actually appear. But it can be helpful if you have some templates and you're spinning up things and you want to be able to control sort of how your users are spinning up those teams. Because keep in mind, any user by default can spin up a team. That may be good, that may be bad. And a lot of times it's bad. So there are some PowerShell commands that you can execute that can prevent normal users from spinning up teams unless they're part of a specified group. Highly suggested that you talk with your admin to do that when you go to do those types of things. There's plenty of articles online that cover how to address that. But if you want to have a little bit more guidance for your people, one of the policies that you could say is if you're going to create a team, always use a template. So then you could create some templates. Now, if you're getting started, you could create a template just to kind of see some of the potentials that, Microsoft themselves being the professionals they are, they've created some very interesting and very powerful Teams channels utilizing a whole bunch of different Microsoft products working collaboratively under a team. So if you kind of want to see what that looks like, I highly suggest doing a few of these just to kind of see and get your idea and the creative juices flowing. And then when you're done, you can delete it. So let's show you how you can remove a team that's been made and put it in what's called archive mode. And then later on, your admin can delete it if they want. Okay. So I think, so Kaylee, if you go under that marketing one you just made, and then you can come under here and say, delete team. So when you click on that, you understand that this kind of stuff is going to happen. And then you can say, delete the team.
Boom, there it goes.
There it goes.
It's a delayed response.
Yes. So it puts it in kind of an archived location temporarily until it eventually gets deleted. Now, your admin can actually go in individually and just archive it where it's not really deleted, and it will just kind of be in a read-only state as well. That's another alternative option that you can do.
You see, I am not an admin, so I can't see it under there. Thank you guys for watching this video. And again, to reiterate, this is so important to understand and grasp before creating your Microsoft Teams and Teams channels, because it's very hard to backtrack and redo everything, especially moving the files and folders and whatnot, once you've already set something in place. And if you guys, again, have any questions, comments, concerns, or whatnot, please make sure to comment down below. If I don't know it, maybe somebody else in this community does too, so we can help out each other. If you want to learn more about some of the topics that we've covered, please make sure to like this video so that we know that you want to see more content like this on our channel. Thank you guys again for watching, and we will see you in the next video. Bye.